to the first lecture of the alumni teaching program. We will be holding for many lectures in the upcoming session, and this is the first one. So we thought to keep it basic, and Sachin sir has gracefully agreed to teach us the basics of indirect taxation. We have received some questions through Google form, and sir will be answering them at the last. And if anyone has question, he can post it on the chat, and we will take them at the end of the session. And I would, apart from the current student, I would like to thank alumni also who have agreed to take their precious time to take the session by Sachin sir, and also their data attending. So you can begin with the session.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is safe and doing well during these difficult times. Uh, I know this is not the right situation to have these sessions, but in difficult times, you get these opportunities, and accordingly, I really appreciate Siddharth for taking this initiative and starting lectures in taxation. I know the situation of college and how things are there. Uh, I would like to thank you all also for participating this session. Now I will open this. I hope that this lecture will not only open the gates for many more to come. It will also help you to some extent in understanding the basics of indirect taxation. Now, since this is the first lecture, before going into indirect tax directly, I will briefly explain you about what is tax and what are all types of taxes that are there. Now, the first question comes to mind is that what is tax? Now, as we all know, that tax is a source of revenue for government. So, what government does is that it asks us to share a portion of our income or expenditure with the government. And why we are sharing the income, why we are sharing a portion of our income or expenditure to the government? It is simple because the government is providing us various facilities, it is giving us securities, it is also providing us various services. And though it is not giving us individually, but it is providing those services to public at large. So in compensation to what the government is providing us, we share a portion from our income or from our expenditure with the government, and that is known as tax. Now coming on to what kind of taxes that are there. So the major head of tax is direct tax and indirect tax. So what is direct tax? Direct tax is when the government directly take your money out of your pocket. In other words, the primary liability to pay tax is on you. So when the government is directly collecting the tax from you, that is the individual or the company, then that is known as direct tax. Direct tax includes income tax, wealth tax, corporate tax, dividend distribution tax. These are some kinds of direct taxes. Now comes indirect tax, which is the subject matter of present lecture. Now, on one hand, in direct tax, the government directly takes the money out of your pocket. In case of indirect tax, the government is indirectly taking your money. It's your money. So the government is indirectly taking your money through a third party. Third party in the sense, it can be a supplier, it can be a manufacturer, it can be a service provider, it can be a seller. So instead of directly connecting the money from your pocket, they are transferring the primary liability to pay tax on a third party. So in case of indirect taxation, even though the actual burden of tax is borne by the individual, that is you, in that situation also, the primary liability to pay tax is on another party. So this is the basic difference between direct tax and indirect tax. Now, Before going into the in detail the basic concepts of indirect taxation, I would like to explain very briefly a very key concept in indirect taxation, that is taxable event. Now, without taxable event, the liability to pay tax does not arise. In case of what is taxable event? Now, a taxable event refers to any event or transaction that results in a tax consequence, meaning there that I am undertaking a particular transaction, and because of that transaction, my liability to pay tax arise. That is known as taxable event. I will give you a very simple example, and I will keep on repeating this example during this whole lecture. Let's say I am manufacturing this mouse. So when I am manufacturing this mouse, the taxable event is manufacture. So I am liable to pay central excise duty on the manufacture of this mouse. Now let's say after I have manufactured this mouse and I have paid central excise duty, I want to sell this mouse. So when I am selling this mouse to someone else, at that point of time, the taxable event is sale. So for selling this goods, that is this mouse, I have to pay VAT or sales tax. Now let's take an example that after I have sold this mouse to a person B, let's say B is also a businessman, and he will eventually, I have sold this mouse in Delhi, and B eventually wants to sell this mouse in Rajasthan. So what he did was he moved this mouse from Delhi to the local area of Rajasthan. So for the movement of this mouse from Delhi to the local areas of Rajasthan, as per the entry tax laws that are prevailing in Rajasthan, he has to pay entry tax. So the goods remains the same, that is this mouse. When I am manufacturing this mouse, I am paying excise duty. When I am selling this mouse, I am paying VAT. And when I am moving this mouse from Delhi to Rajasthan for further business purposes, I am paying entry tax. So what I'm trying to explain here is that indirect tax is tax on the transaction rather than tax on the goods. Nowhere tax liability is on this mouse. The liability always arises on the related transactions that are undertaken in relation to this mouse, and that is taxable event. Taxable event is the backbone of any indirect taxation. So the first step when it comes to indirect taxation is identification of what kind of taxable event has arisen. Now, after understanding what is taxable event, I will briefly explain what all indirect taxes that were prevailing pre-GST era. The reason behind it is that many people will say that what's the point of reading older laws which were prevailing pre-GST in 2017, in 2000, even after 2017. I will tell you, there are basically two reasons. One, that you cannot understand GST without knowing the basics of older indirect tax laws. And second, and the most important, most practical reason is that all these litigation matters related to service tax, related to central excise, related to VAT are not going anywhere. They are here. They will be here till the end of this decade. I'm telling you. The reason being that because of the limitation laws that are there, the department can instigate investigation against any assessee till 2022. And if the investigation will start in 2022, then you know how long it takes to finally dispose of a matter in our litigation system. So what, according to me, that till the end of this decade, you will have to actually some or the other way face different litigation matters that will be related to service tax, central excise, VAT. So you need to know the basics of all these laws. Now, one by one, I will tell you that on what is the taxable event in service tax, what is the taxable event in excise and VAT. Now, first of all, I will deal with service tax. I will tell you that I am, for the last 3.5 years, I have been practicing in service tax litigation team. At present also, even in GST, I am also only handling service tax matters, service GST matters. So in detail, I can go on describing about service tax law myself to what is service and what is the taxable event in service tax. Now, the first question comes in mind is, what is service? Now, service is any activity carried out by a person for another for a consideration. So there has to be an activity. It has to be carried out by a person. There has to be a second person. That activity has to be for some other person and for a consideration. You need to know that why I'm trying to emphasize over. You will get to know later on. So service means any activity carried out by a person for another person for a consideration. All kind of activity comes within the ambit of service. It is very wide. After the introduction of negative list in 2012, the ambit of service tax is very wide. All kinds of activity come in within the purview of service tax, except for those which are enlisted in negative list as well as clarification. Some other day we will deal in detail about these laws, about these concepts. So whenever any activity is carried out by a person for a consideration, the taxable event is triggered. And when that taxable event is triggered, so whenever you are doing any activity for another for a consideration, you are liable to pay service tax. This service tax has been subsequently subsumed, and most of the principles of service tax which was prevailing in 2017 been taken in toto and have been incorporated in GST law. So there is not so much difference in the service tax laws that were prevailing pre-GST and post-GST. It is almost similar. Now, second comes excise. Now, central excise duty is an indirect tax levied on those goods which are manufactured in India and are meant for home consumption. In case of excise duty, please keep your mobile on mute. Yes, the taxable event is manufacture, and the liability of central excise duty arises as soon as the goods are manufactured. So central excise duty in a nutshell is tax on manufacturing, which is paid by the manufacturer and who subsequently passes on the incidence to the customer. The next comes is VAT, sales tax. VAT is on sale or purchase of goods. In case of VAT, the taxable event is sale, and the liability to pay tax is on the seller. It is a tax on sale, and eventually the seller passes on the incidence to its customer. Now, when the sale is undertaking within the boundary of a particular state, then the respective state VAT laws become applicable. Now, when the sale is from one state to another state, Central Tax Act comes into picture, and it is regulated by the central laws. Now, the next one is entry tax. Entry tax is tax levied by the state government on transfer of goods from one state to another. So if you are bringing the goods, irrespective whether it is a sale or whether it is a manufacture related to manufacture, you are moving out from one depot to another depot, or it is in relation to sale, or it is for any other service. The fact that you are moving the goods from one state to another and it is coming within the local areas of a particular state, and that is for a business purpose, then in that circumstances, entry tax is payable. So the taxable event in entry tax is movement of goods into a particular local area from a place outside that local area. Now the last, which is still prevailing, is indirect taxes, customs. One aspect of custom is still there in GST laws regime as well. Now, custom duty is a type of indirect tax which is levied on goods imported into India as well as exported from India. So in case of customs, the taxable event is import into and export from India. Now, what do you mean by import and export? I will briefly tell you that import means movement of goods from a place outside India to a place in India. So the goods have to be moved from a place outside India to place inside in India. And India means the territorial waters also. So when the goods are moved from a place outside India to a place in India, it is import. Similarly, when the goods are moved from a place in India to a place outside India, it is known as export. And the custom duty comes into picture whenever there is involvement of import of goods or export of goods. So this is the basic framework related to what were the basic indirect taxes that were prevailing pre-GST era. Now we'll come on to post-GST. So first of all, I will not go into details of constitutional amendments and everything. I will briefly tell you what was the constitutional amendment and how it is relevant and how it changed the whole constitutional framework. Very briefly, because it's quite boring, and if I go on explaining all the provisions and all the amendments that were introduced in constitutional law, it will take more than an hour for me to explain you all the constitutional amendments that were introduced. So I will just highlight the most important change that was brought in GST regime by a constitutional amendment was the introduction of Article 246A. Before this constitutional amendment, center was empowered to legislate on the entries that are there in central list. State was empowered to legislate on the entries that were there in state list. And both center and state were empowered to legislate on the entries that were there in concurrent list. However, and in that scenario, if there was any conflict between the laws made by the center in concurrent list entry and a state in concurrent list entry, then in that circumstances, the laws made by center always prevailed over the laws made by state. Now, this a new article 246A was introduced, wherein together a new concept was brought and introduced. This was a special provision which gave both center and state simultaneous powers to legislate on GST. What do you mean by simultaneous power? Simultaneous. Yes. So this Article 246 gave simultaneous powers to both center as well as state to legislate on GST laws. I hope I am audible to everyone. Yes. Now, so what do you mean by giving simultaneous power to both center and state? That means that neither the state GST laws nor the central GST laws will prevail over each other. Both will go on respectively. Simultaneously, they will exist, and no one will have superior power over the other law. However, the power to legislate on IGST, that is integrated GST, was given to center. So whenever there was a transaction from a state within two states, that is from A state to B state, that is wherever there was interstate supplies, in those circumstances, IGST Act came into picture. And the whole power to legislate on IGST, that is integrated GST, was given to central government. State government was not allowed to legislate on IGST laws. So this was the basic change that was made in the Constitution of India. Now there were also various changes regarding several powers to levy and laws with respect to GST were given to central government, state government. Various entries in state law, state list and concurrent list, and as well as the central list were removed. Then the amendment also talked about how the revenue that will be generated out of GST, how the apportionment will take place between the central government and the state government, and how the state government will be compensated by way of compensation cess for the loss that they have incurred because of the introduction of GST. There are several other changes. If I'll go on explaining them, it will be quite boring also, and it will confuse you as well. So we can have a separate session for constitutional amendments with respect to indirect taxes, with respect to GST laws. Now I will move on to the basic concepts in GST. Now the first and foremost important concept in GST is that what is the taxable event in GST? So the taxable event in GST is supply of goods and services. So to understand what is the supply of goods and services, it is necessary to understand that what is the meaning of goods and services in GST. Now statutory provisions say that goods means every kind of immovable property other than money and securities. So the ambit of goods for the purposes of GST is very wide. It includes every kind of immovable property. Now I will not go into the details of what is movable property, what is immovable property, because you guys very well know, you have read Transfer of Property Act. So you very well know what is the meaning of movable property and immovable property. So goods means every kind of movable property. So the ambit is very wide. It excludes money and securities. The only difference here is that in GST, the definition of goods also includes actionable claims, subject to certain exemptions that are there. I will not discuss in detail that, because that will take another time. What is actionable claim and how whether it is taxable or not, that's another issue. But for the time being, I will just say that all kinds of movable property means goods for the purpose of GST. It includes actionable claims as well, growing crops, grass, things as to or forming part of the land, which are subsequently agreed to be severed before the supply. So before the supply is made, you have agreed to remove that thing which is attached to the earth, remove it from the land. So when the intention is removing those things from the land, then it falls within the ambit of movable property, and that is goods for the purpose of GST. Now coming on to the definition of service. Now the definition of service is more wider than goods. The definition of service says that it means everything other than goods, money and securities. So the ambit of service is very wide. So whatever is not goods, that is, whatever is not movable property or money or security, is included within the ambit of service. Now, certain exemptions, certain exclusions that are there in GST law, we cannot discuss it right now, but just keep in mind that anything which is other than goods, money and securities is considered as service for the purpose of GST. Now, the next important uh, incidence is what is supply of goods and services. As we have understood, goods is everything that is movable property. Service is anything other than goods. So what do you mean by supply of, what is the scope of supply of goods or services as per the provisions of GST Act? Herein, I will refer to section 7, which talks about scope of GST. Now, section 7 classifies scope of supply of goods and services into three major headings. The first one is that supply of goods and services includes all forms of supply of goods or services or both made or agreed to be made for a consideration by a person in the course or furtherance of business. Now, there are at least 5 conditions mentioned in this single phrase. The first condition is that all forms of supply of goods or services, change, license, rental, even disposal. So all kinds of all forms of supply of goods and services has been kept in the first category. Now, the second condition is made or agreed to be made. Now, made signifies present transaction, agreed to be made signifies future transaction. So ambit is very wide. Not only present transaction, it also includes future transactions within the ambit of supply. So made or agreed to be made for a consideration. I will just discuss in detail what is consideration later on. For a consideration. So consideration is must. For a consideration by a person. Now, when I was explaining service, the definition of service said that any activity carried on by a person for any other person for a consideration. Now, the phrase for any other is not find a place in when they are explaining the meaning of supply. It says for a consideration by a person to whom you are supplying the goods or services, they are not bothered about it. Whether there is a recipient or not, they are not bothered about it. So the taxable event is the moment the goods are moved from one place to another and the supply is initiated, this you are liable to pay tax. They are not bothered about who is the recipient, whether there is a recipient or not. The fact that there is supply, the taxability comes into picture. So by a person in the course or furtherance of business. So there has to be that transaction, that supply has to be in the course furtherance of business. Now, business has been explained in detail that we can, if I will go explaining business also, just understand in layman that all kinds of commercial transaction, if the supply is made with the intention of transaction, it will fall within the bit of business. So the first category involves there has to be supply of goods or services or agreed to be made for a consideration. So there is supply, there is present and future transaction, there is consideration by a person and in the course or furtherance of business. So all requirements are there. There is supply, there is consideration, there are persons, there are that has to be in course and furtherance of business for the first category to be triggered. Now the second category says that supply of goods or services includes import of services for a consideration, whether or not in the course or furtherance of business. So when you are importing a service, that is you are availing the services of a person who is located outside India and the recipient is located in India. So if you are importing a service for a consideration and you are paying a consideration to that person, that in that circumstances, whether it is commercial transaction, whether it is in the course or furtherance of business or not, if there is existence of import of service and consideration, then in that circumstances, the taxable event is triggered. So in case of import of service, the only requirement is that along with the import, there has to be consideration. Now, for the purposes of business, for the purposes of in the course or furtherance of business is not required in the second category. So first category involves both consideration as well as business. Second category does not only includes consideration and no business. Now comes the third category. The third category says that the activities specified in Schedule 1 made or agreed to be made without a consideration. So the third category says that even if the consideration is not there, then also there are some services, there are some activities which are liable, which can trigger liability to pay tax. I will not go in detail what all services are there in Schedule 1. I will just tell you briefly that principal agent services, then services between activities undertaken between related parties, uh, even if they are without consideration, they are subjected to GST. So Schedule 1 lists around 4 activities which can, for even if they are undertaken without consideration, they fall within the ambit of GST. Now, this is the basic meaning of what is supply of goods. So basically, as per section 7, there are 3 categories. In the first category, there has to be a supply, there has to be a consideration, and it has to be in furtherance or course of business. In the second category, that is for import of service, only consideration is there. In course or furtherance of business is not required. And in case of third category, the consideration is not at all required. Whatever activities that are enumerated in Schedule 1, it depends whether they are in course or furtherance of business, that is specifically mentioned category wise in Schedule 1. So even if there is no consideration, the third category is triggered. So basically, in case of GST, these are the 3 circumstances when the taxable event occurs and the liability to pay GST arises. So you have to thoroughly go through GST section 7 and understand the meaning of each and every word that is specified in this section. Now coming on to the point that what is consideration. I will not go much in detail because already we are short of time. Consideration is as per section 2 subclause 28 of the CGST Act, consideration in relation to supply of goods or services includes any payment made or agreed to be made. So if you have made a payment or you have agreed to a payment for any activity or for any supply of goods or services, then the payment made is considered as consideration for that supply. Now there is clause B also. Subclause B says that the monetary value of any act or forbearance, whether or not voluntarily, in respect of or in response to or for the inducement of the supply of goods or services. So not only the monetary value, that is any payment made, they also say that if you are doing any act or forbearance, because we have just read the definition of supply, all forms of supply includes barter also. So in case of barter, you must not have you paid anything to the supplier. You must something in return to the supplier. So when you are doing something in return, it can be possible that the monetary value it cannot be quantified in money. So in those circumstances, they evaluate the monetary value of your act or the forbearance that you are doing, and they consider your act also as consideration for the purposes of GST. So GST, the consideration under GST includes 2 things. One, any explicit payment made or agreed to be made by the recipient to the supplier. 2, any monetary value of the act or forbearance that you have done in return to the supply of goods or services made by the supplier. So this is the basic crux of consideration. We can have a separate session on the whole ambit of consideration and how consideration was there in the pre-GST regime, how it has evolved in GST, and it will take a lot of time to explain you each and every details. So you can actually on each and every topic that I am right now explaining you, you can have a separate session on each and every topic. That what is supply? It will take whole day to explain you the whole ambit of supply. Then what is consideration? It will take a whole day to explain you what is consideration also. So in the coming, I am very much hopeful that in coming sessions we will cover individually all these key concepts of indirect taxation. Now the next concepts, the next important thing in GST is that who is liable to pay tax. We all know that in case of the general liability in GST is on the supplier. So since it is it is a kind of indirect taxation, the liability to pay GST generally is upon the supplier. Now there is exception to this rule also. The exception is known as reverse charge mechanism. You will hear this reverse charge mechanism day in and day out when you are litigating. Reverse charge mechanism is that instead of supplier, when the recipient, the liability to pay tax is casted upon the recipient, that is, the liability is reversed. And instead of supplier, the liability to pay tax is casted upon the recipient. And that is known as reverse charge mechanism. Now, they have issued various notification through which they have explained that all these in these cases, if you are supplying goods, you are the recipient is liable to pay. In these cases, if you are supplying goods, the supplier is liable to pay. There is explicit list given in various notifications by the central government and the respective state government, wherein they have explained that in what category the supplier is liable to pay and in what category the recipient is liable to pay. They explicitly tell you. Some of the cases is that why the reason behind having reverse charge mechanism is that some of the time it becomes in a transaction, it becomes difficult for the government to catch the supplier. So for their convenience, they cast the liability on the recipient. The best example is import of service. Because you are importing service from a service provider who is located outside India, and the government finds it difficult to catch hold of the service provider who is located outside India. What the government does is it casts the liability to pay tax on import of services on the recipient. That's the best example. So this is what is reverse charge mechanism. Now I will explain another concept that is very much prevalent in litigation. That is input tax credit. Now what is input tax credit? In simpler terms, input tax credit means whatever tax I have paid on the inputs that I have used for my output, whatever tax I have paid on my inputs for providing my output, I am given this option to take credit of the tax paid on those inputs and utilize that credit to discharge my liability of tax on the output. I'll explain you how. Let's say to manufacture this mouse, I require plastic, rubber, nut, and bolts. And also, let's say I require certain services of experts, yeah, skilled labor. Let's say that for when I purchase this plastic or nut bolts or avail the services of laborers, I paid on to the said suppliers. Because when I'm purchasing those plastics or those goods, or I am availing those services, from those suppliers, I am acting as a consumer for them. So when I am acting as a consumer for those supplies, the liability to pay tax is on those supplier, and eventually I am the one who has paid the tax to the suppliers. So on when I purchase those inputs, I have already paid tax. So when eventually I manufacture this mouse and I'm going to sell this mouse, I will include all the costs that I have incurred for manufacturing this mouse. That cost will include the tax that I have already paid while purchasing this plastic, the nut and bolts, and everything. So let's say when I purchase those goods, I paid rupees 4 as GST. So what I will do is I will specify that on the in my accounts, in my ledger, I will specify everything is happening electronically. So I will specify that these are the certain goods and services that I have utilized for manufacturing this mouse. And on these goods, I have paid this much amount, rupees 4 as tax. Now what government will do is that they will verify that yes, you have paid 4 rupees 4 on the inputs that you have utilized to manufacture these goods. So they will credit that rupees 4 that I have already paid in my ledger account. Now, let's say when I'm selling these goods, I have to pay rupees 10 as GST. So what I will do is I will utilize that rupees 4 that I have already paid on my inputs, and that is kept as credit in my account, to discharge my liability of rupees 10 for while selling this mouse. So instead of paying rupees 10 from my pocket, what I will do is I will pay rupees 4 from the credit ledger and pay only rupees 6. So what is the impact of this? The implication is that I am not paying again tax on the plastic or on the inputs that I used for manufacturing these goods. Because if I pay again rupees 10 to the government instead of the government was eligible to get tax on this commodity rupees 10 only, they will eventually get 14, and which will amount to double taxation. So to avoid double taxation, the government gives you this facility that whatever tax you have paid on inputs, you can utilize that amount that while paying tax on the output. And this is the simplest way of explaining what is input tax credit. And you get a lot of litigation related to input tax credit. Now there are several other concepts like place of supply, then time of supply, then in credit in detail. There are several provisions. Then there is transfer pricing is there, concept of transfer pricing is there, works contract, several transactions are there, several concepts are there that will take individually 45 minutes or 1 hour for me to explain. So in coming lectures, hopefully someone else will address those issues and will clarify and will clear basic concepts on those concepts individually. So this is it from my side. Now you can proceed with the question and answer. Siddharth?
Yes, sir. So I'm just sending you the questions. So, sir, the first question is from Vardhaman. It is whether TDS is an indirect tax or not.
Okay, Vardhaman, I have just explained you what is direct tax and indirect tax. When I was explaining what is direct tax and indirect tax, I told you that direct tax is when the government is directly taking the money out of your pocket. And indirect tax is something when a third party is made liable to pay the tax on your behalf. So in case of TDS, as you very well know, that in income tax, the liability to pay deduct TDS is on the employer. In indirect taxes, the liability to deduct TDS is on the supplier. So eventually, even though you will eventually be bearing the cost of those TDS, the liability to pay is on the third party. So according to me, you can very well say that TDS is indirect tax.
Yes. So the next question is from someone that what are the provision with respect to the transfer of credit with respect to cess from the old law? Also, can the
Mhm.
person claim refund of SENVAT of amount of
Mhm.
cess because there is no provision of lapse in the SENVAT rules?
Mhm. If I will answer this question, the firm will remove me from their roll call. This is a technical question. I know uh, I'm not supposed to answer this question at this point of time. What I can say is that you can refer to section 140, which talks about transition provisions and which tells you that when the input tax credit can be transferred from pre-GST regime to post-GST regime and what are the implications in that. I cannot answer technical questions right now. I am restrained. I'm so sorry.
So next question is regarding the works contract. So someone has asked what is work contract and how it has evolved with various case laws.
Yeah. A few minutes ago, I told you that works contract it is itself so wide, and the history behind works contract is such that it will take for me it will take hours to explain you what is works contract. Simpler terms, I can tell you that works contract is a supply wherein there is supply of both goods and services. So when a particular transaction involves both goods as well as services, it is known as works contract service, and it has its historical background in service tax law. It has its background in GST. You will have to understand all those things. When it comes to case laws, I can tell you that you can go through Larsen and Toubro. It's Supreme Court 2015 decision. That's the landmark decision in works contract service. So you can go through that decision. That decision has referred to several other case laws also. So you can very well go through Larsen and Toubro, and you will get hold of what is works contract and how the mechanism works.
And so the last question, sir, what is the role of transfer pricing in India?
Oh, I will. What to say?
So
Uh,
you
this topic will also take a whole session to explain that what is transfer pricing and how it works.
so still in
At this point of time, I can just tell you that transfer pricing comes into picture when the transaction takes place between two related parties. The fact that the transaction is taking place between two related parties shows that there can be a possibility that they might undervalue the transaction. So because of the possibility of undervaluation of a transaction, transfer pricing comes into picture. uh, how it works and how rules and how the evaluation rules and everything have been framed, it will take a lot of time to explain that. But I can say that whenever in a related party any transaction happens, they go through arm's length, that is a big concept in direct taxation, or they consider market price of that transaction, and accordingly they evaluate the correct value of the transaction, and that includes transfer, and that is what transfer pricing is.
so we have got another question.
Yes.
Can a firm take tax input for certain goods like their fixed assets such as transportation vehicle, and can they use this put while selling their other goods such as cements or other stuff?
I'm sorry, I cannot answer this question. I will explain you why I cannot answer. The fact is that I am attached to a law firm. So if I will start giving answers to a particular transaction, whether input tax credit can be availed or whether GST liability arises or not, I will be really scolded by my bosses. Please try to understand.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for this wonderful session. We will be holding
I
many.
can also ask that you
Family.
people, you guys, yes, you guys can come out and directly ask that about other than GST law, that whether you, what about the future in taxation, whether what you see, whether you should pursue taxation or not. You can ask HR questions also to me. You have this opportunity. Yes, someone was saying something.
Please unmute yourself, whoever was asking the question. Hello. Uh,
Hello.
Actually, I couldn't even see. Even I couldn't see who has unmuted herself. So,
Mhm.
since he isn't asking, I think we should end this session here.
Okay, no problem. No problem.
Thank you, sir, for taking out your valuable time and giving us the inaugural lecture for our small circle that we have started just a week back.
Okay.
Uh, so we would also like to thank all the alumni because many alumni were also there in this session, as we can see through the participants list. And we will be holding further lectures in the coming months over various issues such as concentration, supply, and we will be touching other area of taxation also
Yeah,
uh,
individually. Yes.
individually, so that
Yeah.
everyone can have ample of time to explain deep topics such as consolidation or maybe supply or maybe transfer pricing.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Sure. Sure.
So thank you everyone. Now you
Thank you.
can
Thank
log
you.
out.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you sir for coming.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.